Your Culture Show.
And I try so hard to work at that.
Not that well.
All the time.
Every time we've done this, your culture's been showing.
You know what? And I think it's probably going to always be showing because you can't help it.
I'm Tom Peterson, and our producer, Torrance, here. Are you here, Torn?
I am here.
Oh,
Hello.
yeah. Sorry, did I wake you up? I don't want to.
We'll just ring a bell next time.
Yeah, really. Thanks for being with us. Jeez. Okay. Well, again, yes, this is Oops, Your Culture's Showing, and we are happy to have you along with us once again. Hopefully you've been following us for a bit now. And Dean Foster, who is my co-host in this craziness, and a specialist and an expert. Can we give you the expert label?
Oh, I'll take it.
Okay, good. I'm giving it to you. Because otherwise, who's going to listen?
Who's going to give it to me?
Who cares?
You can't give it to me.
I got to give it to you.
My publisher said, okay, now you've published 5 books. You're an expert.
You're an expert. Good enough. I'd say after the first one, you're right
Okay.
up there. We'll give you that. Sure. And you got nothing else going for you. So we might as well go with that.
Let's.
Okay. The last time we talked at you guys, we put out a thought out there about elevators. Why elevators? Well, what we put out there was that in all over the world, but certainly in the United States, there's a certain kind of quirkiness to and it is cultural in the way people behave, generally behave.
Let's put this in context. I don't mean to interrupt. Oh,
No,
but don't you
did
hate
mean to interrupt.
Of
In fact,
course,
you
I
did
do.
interrupt.
Don't you hate people who do that? They say,
Yes, and
"Oh,
right now, well, I don't say I hate you right now.
No,
but
I hate it.
But
But people say,
I could push you down an escalator, but hopefully people understand that because they've been listening
and
to
that's
the show
what I was.
also.
That's what I was meaning to interrupt about.
Oh.
But I want to talk about interrupting for a second.
Okay.
When people say, "Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt," that is precisely what they mean to do,
And they're doing
and they're
it.
telling you that.
In that act, they're doing it. Yeah, last podcast, we were talking about escalators.
And
Yes.
the fact that I fell down an escalator.
You did,
and
which I
was-
find wonderful. But go ahead.
And I wanted you to have the same experience.
You did.
Just
which
to
I don't find as
understand
wonderful. Right
what
there.
the point that I was making at the time, which I don't remember now.
I don't remember either.
But
it was fascinating in
it was
the moment.
it was a fabulous. It was one of those examples of trying to remember something that
Right.
you can't
We had no
remember.
idea. No. Okay.
Where were we?
Well, that's all, folks. We are.
So that took us to elevators.
Elevators, yes.
And the
escalators to
cultural
elevators.
issue-
And you were going to. The interruption thing you already did. Never mind. Go ahead. Escalators to elevators.
Well, you're interrupting me again.
Well, that's my job.
Is there a word? I would like to ask the listeners if anyone knows if there is a word, and if there isn't, there should be. I think
Okay.
that describes the phenomenon of when an individual in a group of people is trying to remember a word or a thought,
Mm-hmm.
and can't remember the actual word,
Mm-hmm.
and asks the other people in the group, what's the word for, when something like this happens, da, 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 da. And by asking the question to others, because I forgot, nobody remembers.
Oh, nobody. I thought you were going to say then you remember because you asked them.
Well, that's one possible.
That's another word. You're looking for the word. You say it, no one can think
There
of
is a phenomenon of social interaction
That's
where
a good
when
question.
one person forgets,
I don't remember
you
what we were
are
talking
first making everyone else forget in raising the issue of trying to remember.
because then they're all so focused on it, no one can actually remember it.
And in a way, this is an example of the power of culture.
Is
the
it?
power of
It
social
better be, because that's why we're here.
social interactions.
Okay.
So what happens that all of a sudden everyone forgets the same word at the same time? I've seen this phenomenon happen.
Yes.
It's happened to me.
They actually know. That's your point. They actually know.
Yes.
And yet it's just not there, but you know what they're looking for. And none of the people who are involved can come up with it in that moment.
But we were talking about elevators and escalators.
Oh, were we?
And
we
the-
really
and the-
weren't.
and
Because
the
you
co-
went off on some tangent about God knows what. I can't remember.
Did I?
So
You could never expect me to do that. So the cultural issue of the escalator was that people smiled and laughed as they helped me after I tripped off the escalator.
right. I would have done that had I been there.
But that would have been an individual reaction and not a cultural reaction.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you raised the question, which we then posed to the listeners at the end of the last podcast, about are there cultural aspects to elevators?
Right.
And you were asking actually if anybody knew of any that were
Specific to the U.S.
Specific to the U.S.
Well,
Right.
at least generally consistent in the U.S. And it could be in other areas too, but the U.S. certainly does it.
And I received an email from an individual in, I think it was Boise, Idaho, who asked, didn't give us an answer,
No.
but asked for clarification. Came to the wrong people for a clarification.
Attention, clarification.
Sure.
Yes. No, I can clarify this.
They wanted to know if was this with the doors open or closed.
The doors are closed. The doors are closed in the U.S.
I'm going to guess.
Okay. We have not discussed this
Well,
outside of the podcast.
no, we have not.
Okay.
We have not.
You can trust us. We never lie.
But I think the point that you're trying to make,
You're not supposed to laugh at that, Torn.
never intentionally.
We can be wrong, but we never lie.
I think the cultural point you're trying to make here is that individuals in an enclosed space like an elevator in the U.S. will always seek to stand as far away from other individuals as possible, while in many other cultures,
Mhm.
in a similar situation, in an elevator or maybe on a bus,
Right?
a crowded vehicle,
A subway, something along those lines.
individuals might choose to sit as close to other individuals
Mhm.
as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was on a bus once in Cairo,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was very much struck by the phenomenon of getting on that bus and noticing that there was a lot of space. It was not a crowded bus, a
Mhm.
rare thing in Cairo, right?
Right.
It must have been the hour of the day or whatever, or the route I was taking.
Right.
I was probably going to some place that nobody ever goes to except American tourists. So it wasn't very crowded. Anyway, I'm on the bus and there's 2 or 3 other people there. And as a few other people came onto the bus, the people who came onto the bus sat next to the few people who were already on the bus. And right away, when I come on the bus, I look for the seat as far away from people
With plenty of room.
with plenty of room.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that was the issue that you were raising about the
Well,
elevator.
that has a distinct influence on the entire thing. Yes, absolutely. It is the cultural aspect that creates it, is the idea of individual space, personal space. And that in the U.S. we have in the worldview, we have a very large demand for personal space. We have a large country, and
it's
have
a continental-sized nation. There's
Yes.
space and vastness, which is
Yes.
why we build buildings that are horizontal instead of vertical, unless
Right.
you're on a small island like Manhattan.
Like
where
Manhattan.
then
and
you go
Manhattan
vertical.
and places like that.
Right.
But you go to Los Angeles,
Yeah,
and Los
it's
Angeles
spread
doesn't
out.
have the restrictions, so it spreads itself out.
It's why men sit on subways in the man spread,
Right.
It has its effect in so many different areas. But
Yes.
the point is,
I've already
it's-
got a picture in my head now that I don't need to have after that. But,
well, it's this, you've
and they
got a
should
lot
sit
of,
away from other people if they're doing that.
You got a lot of space, so
Yeah.
you can just use it up.
That's very
Right.
true.
I've
And
checked
people
it-
will move in a space when there isn't enough room initially, but then it opens up. You will see in the U.S. you will see people spread out.
Okay,
You'll
so
see them move
I'm from
away.
New York City, so it's a little bit more vertical than horizontal, right?
Mhm, definitely.
But the rest of the country is not necessarily like
Right,
that.
right.
And I remember one time I checked into a hotel in Dallas,
hmm
right? All right, and this is Texas, where everything's it's the the iconic myth. It's large and it's big and it's
Right.
spread out. But it's true. I mean, I checked into this hotel room in Dallas. It was so vast. This room was so vast. And this was not an expensive or strange hotel room. This was just an average hotel room for a business meeting that I
Mhm.
went to there for. The bed's on one side. By the time you got from the bed to the bathroom, you crossed the time zone.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to give myself. I had to figure out how much time it was going to take me to get to the door in order to plan my day.
Yeah.
That's how big.
Oh
it
yeah,
was.
it's and that's the whole thing. Even within the United States, you've got these areas that are far less populated than other areas. And in those areas, you're going to get a fluctuation of personal space because of that. People, if you're growing up and you're used to having that kind of expanse at your leisure that you can use, then the concept of being in tight quarters with people is going to seem probably uncomfortable.
But here's the thing. Then you could also try to make the argument that if you're in all of these tight quarters all the time, and suddenly you're in a situation where you did have all this space, wouldn't you seek that as a luxury? Wouldn't you then take it? But here are these people in Cairo getting on a bus, and there was space, or walking into an elevator, and there is space. There's only one other person in that elevator. In cultures where interpersonal space is not the issue becomes more of, I depend on personal relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want to stand next to the person who's in there. I want to sit next to the person on the bus. And it's not about the availability of the luxury of space, but rather it's about, that's going to just feel all lonely and far away.
Right.
And I don't want to feel that way.
Right. Being around people is,
right.
And because and I think as you were describing it, I was thinking, well, but I'm more comfortable this way. Whichever way it is, I'm more comfortable that way. But it's going. You think about those kind of things. Those things are going to change the way you think.
So in the elevator, what you're saying then is the U.S. phenomenon of walking into the elevator and taking the spot that's furthest away from anybody else.
Well, they'll take the spot that's furthest away. But even if it's full, people in the U.S. tend to get onto an elevator, and let's say not if just you and I got into an elevator.
When I got into an elevator. The whole other thing.
Well, it is for a lot of
reasons.
You
got to take out insurance first. They make us sign.
And I would definitely move as far away from you as I possibly could.
They make us sign NDAs and everything before they get us.
Yeah. If you get on and it's basically a full elevator, and you get on, here's what tends to happen. People in the U.S. get onto the elevator, they turn, they face back toward the doors. And they stand there quietly, silently, and stare at, let's say, the numbers going.
Or if it's really crowded, you stare at your toes.
You stare at your toes
at the numbers,
and so on. Yes.
The floors
and that is predominantly what happens in this country, almost regardless of where you get onto an elevator. Now, technology has altered that a little bit, only in the sense that some people get on talking on their phones and continue to talk. But if you look around that elevator, most people will be annoyed by the person who's talking on their phone while they're on the elevator. But you see, when again, we're getting to the comfort factor, right? These people now are standing on an elevator. They get on there, and I'm saying if there's like one other person on the elevator, there's a good chance that the people are going to get on the elevator, turn, and look at the numbers go by. Or in some of the elevators now, they've started putting up little screens.
Oh,
where
you can get all sorts of
and
news
or weather.
You can buy real estate,
right?
In a building that's.
You can find somebody to date, I believe.
Yes,
it's there's all sorts of cool things they're trying
to
put in there.
Screen. Now
but
some of them have touch screens.
Well, geez, I don't know. Touching on the elevator is not going to work.
Touch the screen.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. If you're on that elevator and the reason that works in the U.S. especially is because they know all these people, they're not talking and they're all staring at the doors, like waiting for the doors. They're puzzled as to when the doors will open again and let them out. Let's take a break. Okay, listen, the way to get hold of us is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is Oops Culture Show. Whether this is the first episode or the third episode or whatever episode that you've listened to, if you're still listening at this point, I think you might like this. And if you do, you should really subscribe. Because if you subscribe, these things will just show up for you, and you can listen to them whenever you want to. That's the best way to go, really, honestly. I know what I'm talking about. All right, so just subscribe through iTunes or through wherever you get your podcasts from. But do it today, okay? Subscribe. Thank you.
So here's the thing to do. You stand in the elevator and you start to sing in a crowded elevator.
Okay.
Just start to sing. Hum a song.
Yes.
And if you want some space.
Well, I think that probably would do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or you could turn to the person
yourself,
next
they're
to you.
going to think you're on the phone.
Talk.
You know?
You can do what I do when I'm on an airplane, a crowded plane, and the person next to me is a talker. By the way, I'm not a talker on a plane. I'm on planes so much.
You don't talk.
No.
Okay.
So,
okay. Make a note of that, everyone. Make a note.
Really?
He does not talk. Okay, because that's important.
So if you open the book, you put on dark glasses, you
Yeah.
put your headset on,
Yeah.
and the person next to you is still talking,
Yeah.
then you cough.
Oh.
Then you start to cough, and you turn to that person and you say, "I'm really sorry. It's the tuberculosis."
Oh, jeez. Oh.
And not only will they not talk to you,
You went there, didn't you? You went there. You went there.
but the flight attendant will miraculously appear in a few minutes and find a seat for that person.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Or maybe remove you from the plane. You'll be a video on YouTube
I have
before
never
long.
been removed for that.
Well,
It's
no,
interesting.
surprising. I'm surprised. Remind me the next time we fly together, I'll have you removed.
Maybe it's because I say it's waning.
It's yeah. Okay, and hopefully they know what that means. Anyway, yes. Well, I will tell you this: when I was considerably younger and working in New York with a friend of mine,
You couldn't have been significantly younger.
when I say it's all relative, although it was not a relative that I was working in New York with, and we when we were traveling in the building, the buildings can be in New York. If you're not familiar with New York City, the buildings can be extremely tall. So you can get onto an elevator that's going to go 70 floors.
Oh, you've got to adjust your ear pressure.
You do. And some of them move quite rapidly. But the point
I
was...
think on every elevator in those big buildings,
Yes.
excuse me for interrupting.
No, you're not
I don't mean
excused
to
at all.
interrupt,
You did it
but-
and you meant to do it. And I understand that.
By floor 45,
Yes.
it should automatically stop and
By 4:45, is that the time?
no,
Oh.
the floor,
Oh,
the 45th
floor
floor.
45. Okay.
There should be an automatic dispenser in the
Just
elevator
they pop
that
out like the
pop out,
masks
gives
on the
everybody
airplane
chewing
if you
gum.
lose pressure or something.
everybody gets chewing
They
gum.
all get chewing gum. Does it shoot out and into your
Just
mouth?
shoots out into the elevator.
That
Because without it, your ears explode by the time you go.
I think there's so many things wrong with that. I can't see any lawsuits at all happening from that.
Like what?
Do we get a warning? Does it like a little thing from
The
like
45th floor.
it's
It lights up in red, and after a while, everybody will know that 45 means,
after a while it says
means
first few
means
times
you get the
when you
chewing gum.
blinded people, usually children because they're at that height. Please put on your goggles. Please open your mouth. Those who do not want chewing gum, please keep your mouth closed and be prepared to be hit in the face. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a perfect idea.
Well, also, but if it's a big building,
Yes,
by the time
there's
you get,
more.
By the time you get to the 80th floor,
Uh-uh.
there's going to be chewing gum on the ground.
All over the place.
On the floor.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think that's...
I don't know what cultural
how have
question
they not
that
done
answers,
that?
but
Well, no, but it asks a whole lot of questions about you that may or may not need to be answered.
I'm always looking out for
Um,
the other people in the elevator
well,
car that I'm
and
sharing.
it's noble, truly noble.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, listen, I thought you were going to go to having like the masks that fall down in the airplane when you lose pressure. You would have like little almost earbuds fall out of the ceiling for people to put into their ears to balance the pressure. That's where I thought you were going with it.
As opposed to chewing gum?
Yeah, as opposed to the chewing gum thing.
Well, I mean, the chewing gum is cheaper.
And you lose fewer eyes with the earbuds falling out of the ceiling. And then they could just suck themselves back up. And I'm sure no one would mind sticking earbuds in that everybody else has used during the day into
That's
their
why
ears.
the chewing gum is better, because
chewing
you're
gum
always
is-
getting a fresh.
Yeah, do we know that
Always-
for sure,
yeah.
though?
You're never getting a pre-used piece of chewing gum like an earbud. The chewing gum's no, that has to be
No. Okay. Well, I like my earbud idea, but there must be a way to sanitize. We'll work it out. I'll get funding for that sucker.
The devil's in the details.
It is. It's just there's small little details there. But I do like the fact that it happens as you're going up and there. Anyway, what my friend and I used to do was we'd get onto the elevator, and as the elevator took off and we're heading, and you glance over and you see the next stop is like the 40th floor. That's the next one that's been, you were in the lobby. So you got a little bit of a trip here. And as you're rising up there, one of us would turn to the other and say, so did the doctor say how contagious it was? and, and typically we would get more room in the elevator.
Somehow they
point.
find more room.
Yeah. It seems to have overridden the cultural bias that was taking place right there. Yeah. Or maybe that is a cultural thing right there, a fear of becoming extremely ill. And it is a cultural thing
and the
because of
cultural
personal space.
piece to that is personal space.
Absolutely. And we feel uncomfortable in that environment.
And I think we trust more in the individual ourselves. I don't need to share it with someone else, and I'm not necessarily interested if somebody shares theirs with me.
And I don't want to overhear, and I don't want people to overhear what I'm saying either, generally.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen because people will get on, stop conversations, stand, and we get the ding, ding.
And you got to wonder,
ding.
What is it that they don't want me to hear?
Well,
that they were talking
because
about.
It's weird, and they'll do that though. And then when the doors open and they go off, they'll pick it up and just start talking in the conversation again.
So that's when you should follow them, because
then,
if you really want to know what
stay
it was
right
that
behind them, same distance as you were on the elevator. I'm sure that won't bother them at all. By the way, if you're not from the culture of the U.S., you do not want to do that. Okay.
That whole issue of personal space that you're raising is a very cultural issue. You know, in cultures where you're comfortable for whatever reason, maybe because it's simply so crowded, you have to get used to, even though there's something you might not like,
right?
You're that way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're just used to being that close to people. I mean, I remember one time I was in Hong Kong with my wife and my daughter, and we were at a little food court, and now Hong Kong is if not the most densely populated place, square mile for square mile, maybe. If it's got to be up there, like the top 3.
Okay, Torin, can you check that out?
If it isn't the
density,
most, the
population density, is it the most, or is it close to the most?
So we went into
populated?
this.
Sure.
Thank you, Torin. Thank you. And if it's not, if I'm wrong, I don't want to hear from you.
Yeah, make it up.
Okay.
So we go into this food court, and we sit down, and it's lunchtime.
Okay.
Right.
That's a good reason to go into the food court.
We're finally there. We sit down, and as soon as we sat down, we find a seat, which is lucky and fortunate. There were several people standing right over us where we were eating.
Okay.
Now, this is unusual in the U.S. experience.
Yes.
People don't do that.
Yes.
If you're waiting for a table, you wait at another area.
So they were standing
right there.
right around your table.
I mean, literally by our shoulders.
Yes.
Watching us eat.
Mm-hmm.
Because waiting for us to finish, and then when we were finished, they were going to then take that space.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right? And I understood what was going on, and I explained it to my daughter. But afterwards, clearly a metaphor for the intercultural experience. She said, "Daddy, I understand what you were saying, and I understand things can be different here." She said, "But I didn't like it."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
It was uncomfortable. She wasn't used to it.
And thus the reason you need to be prepared for things like that.
She needed the personal space that she was more accustomed to.
The comfort area is so important to all of this, much more so than people realize, but on both sides. Because you don't want to do things that make other people feel
then you can get
uncomfortable in their
agoraphobic,
culture.
Right, because then people who are comfortable in those circumstances, placed in a situation, let's say in the United States, where there's vast space,
yes,
can become almost agoraphobic. I mean, there's too much space. I don't know what to do. There are stories of people who come into U.S. supermarkets, for example, and kind of wander the aisles almost in a state of shock.
Yes.
Because they're so vast.
Yes.
The selections are so massive. And yet they still can't find the food that they like.
Right.
And there is just too much.
Too many choices.
There's too much space, too many choices.
Sure.
Just too much. So you can be overwhelmed by a little bit of space. You can be overwhelmed by a lot of space.
Yes. It's going to impact you one way or the other. And especially when you're on the extremes. And I think this is probably just a general statement about cultures, right? Is that when you're in the extremes of those kinds of things.
When the extremes meet.
Bang.
Yes. Then it's intense.
Yes. So, okay, good. Now, can we say that people riding in elevators in cultures where they feel close to each other, they would perhaps just continue conversations and you get a much louder elevator.
Well, oftentimes that is the case.
Okay.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah, for sure.
Now, I will say also, you're looking at that, you've got New York City is different.
I mean, I do want to. I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to interrupt.
You see, you keep saying that, and I keep getting interrupted. Is pretty much the bottom line.
I just want to throw out
here.
the caveat, an asterisk.
Oh, do you? Well, you can pick up your caveat if you throw it.
An
okay?
asterisk, a caveat, a disclaimer.
Anything else?
Yeah, it's all the it's all
the same. Is it? So I would say this sounds like a good time for a break. We'll be right back. Got any questions for us? Well, if you do, there's a couple of ways to get hold of us. First of all, on email, our email address is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And our handle on Twitter is oopscultureshow. Pretty clever, huh? So talk to us.
Of course, if people walk on an elevator in those kinds of cultures and they do need to have a confidential conversation.
Yes.
I mean, obviously they're going to stop talking.
Well,
right?
Okay, sure.
I mean,
something they don't want other people to overhear.
I don't want these. I want to make a point that these general statements of culture that we're making are under general circumstances,
right?
Not under specific circumstances like a confidential.
Right. And individuals will vary
more or less.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now you can pick up where I interrupted you.
I have no idea where I was. Now, see, this is where we get to the point. Do you have any idea where I was? And
it doesn't matter, though. I'll keep talking.
Oh, well, I know you will, and that's disturbing.
Well, a friend of mine, for example, in Buenos Aires, he's a U.S. American. He said, I've gotten to the point where when he goes down to visit his Argentine friend who lives on one of these lovely apartments on one of the main grand boulevards in Buenos Aires. So there's a terrace. And he says, every time I visit my Argentine friend, I have to remember not to step back when my friend comes in to talk to me.
Sure.
Because in Argentina, the personal space, and in many Latin cultures, personal space is less than in North American and Northern European space.
Yeah.
So he talks close. Right, a close talker, right?
Right.
And on a balcony, the U.S. American steps back. He comes in. He steps back.
There's limitations to how far you want to step back.
The last time he went down there to visit, his friend put up a railing on the balcony because he was afraid so many North Americans
drive him off the wall,
literally into the boulevard 5 floors below.
That wouldn't be good. No, that's a painful experience.
Yeah,
at that point.
don't step back.
Yeah.
So personal space is less in places like in the Latin world, in the Middle East, in many parts of Asia.
Sure.
You're standing on a line in China and people are up against your back. I mean, physically, they're up against your back. I can't tell you how many U.S. Americans just can't deal with that.
Can't deal with it. And except
the physical touching.
Right.
Right.
Well, right. Yes.
But if it's not your experience,
it's strange.
It can be
uncomfortable.
Right.
And people who do this on a regular basis, there's a comfort zone.
Well, see, now you raise an issue of the line or the queue, as we say in Britain, right?
And much of the world who speaks
English,
British
English, as opposed to the strange American English that we speak in the U.S.
Right.
So the queue, from a cultural perspective, again, related to this idea of personal space.
Yeah.
In China, for example, you're walking down a crowded street, you may get poked in the ribs. Somebody's kind of almost physically pushing you aside.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And the Westerner says, oh, that's rude. I mean, that's pushing me physically. The old Chinese ladies with their very sharp elbows. They're kind of like and that's an iconic myth in China, but it's real because that's what happens.
They're valuable tools for them.
And then you have the opposite situation in London.
Yeah.
Where, you queue up, and if anybody dares touch anybody else, that's very, very offensive, and you got to understand where these two different perspectives are coming from. Because of the Chinese cultural issue of groups, if I'm a member of a group and you're a member of that same group, then I am, in fact, extremely polite, and I would never thrust my elbow into your ribs to get you out of the way.
Okay.
Because we have a relationship with each other. But in the absence of that, if you're just an anonymous number on the street
Yes.
with you and another million Chinese people walking down the boulevard, then it's because we don't have a relationship, it empowers either one of us to do anything to the other one.
Okay.
Because it's not rude.
Interesting.
I don't
So
know you.
Yeah, sure.
Rudeness is only based on the fact that I have a relationship with you.
Right.
Right? Okay. We have the opposite situation in London where because I don't know you, I have to be polite.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And once we know each other, then we can be as rude as we need to be.
That explains a lot of my experiences in England, or with the British people. Sure. Now, an interesting aspect of that too is you really look at or at least I'm
And by the
claiming
way,
it's interesting.
it's not.
It may not be.
By the way, it's not that I can be as rude as possible. Now that I know you, it's simply that I can be as honest with you as possible.
Sure.
Now that I know,
Which
you.
will probably turn out to be somewhat.
It might.
It will if you didn't know well, it's like you and I.
But I can't imagine you ever doing anything that would make anyone, British or otherwise, feel like they need to be rude with you. You're one of the most polite people I know.
Oh my God! This has got to be leading to something where I have to pay something.
Just be ready.
Because that's what I thought. Because I know that's not true. But I am that person, and that's true. And yeah, okay. So here's a little quick question here about because we were talking about the U.S. is continental in size, and yeah, it's stuck between two oceans and two other countries, and that's it. So it has this huge expanse. So the personal space thing can obviously be larger, and there are exceptions like New York City,
major
Chicago,
urban
something like
centers.
that.
Yeah.
However, when you talk about China, now in China is a huge country, and it certainly it's bigger than the United States. So you've got this huge country now, and you've got a lot of people living in it.
Geographically, almost the same.
About the same. Okay,
Yeah.
but you've got a lot more people there. Am I correct with that?
Yes, that's what makes the difference.
And therefore,
I mean, the entire population of the United States is equivalent to the statistical deviation that's used to calculate the population of China.
Wow. I have no idea what you just said.
The entire population of the United States.
You're a deviation, by the way. And I can say that because I've known you for a while. We've got to know each other.
A statistical deviation.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt
A
in my mind.
metaphorical deviation.
Pretty much any deviation.
A metaphysical deviation.
Okay. That explains much.
No, the population of China is so much faster, so much more than the United States. And therefore, you've got 15 cities that most Americans don't even know the names for,
right,
that have populations of over 15 million people each.
Yeah, that's quite a few. Yeah.
And it's still considered a rural country.
Right.
Because the majority of the population is still living out in the countryside.
Sure. Wow.
And we want to have a trade war with these people.
Yeah, let's think about that one. So you've got that, and then you start talking, and rightfully so, about the Brits, the British Isles, and where that is an island. And although it's not a tiny island, it's still an island. It's restricted. You've got a couple of countries on that island. But I'm guessing that the idea that the population is much less there, it allows for this a little bit more room there. So, but their personal space isn't anywhere near what our personal space is.
Again, that's different in London, right?
Yeah.
So London's a
London
very
is a little
crowded
different, sure,
international city, and personal space is.
And I'm sure it is in a couple of other cities there too. But generally speaking, they're going to, and they have a little less personal space than we do. On the norm, am I correct with that?
Yes, I would say the norm is that there's less personal space.
They would be
not a continental
let's say
nation.
between us and China or other nations like that,
Right,
India,
right.
where there's large population in their space. Okay, so you've got that, but their reactions are a little different. Now we're also talking about very old cultures. Very old, and both in
you got
England
very, very,
and in
very
China.
old in China,
Yes.
and you got very old in Britain, and then you
Yes.
got not so old.
And then the kids that showed up last week.
The kids who showed up last week
Yeah.
on the other side of the pond.
Right. who, although it does seem like we're aging rapidly these days, but that's another
Whether
story.
we're maturing is another question.
I'm willing to bet money on that one. That's not happening. But okay. So, but nevertheless, it's not necessarily totally exclusive in these things to each one of those places, but it's certainly dictated by what their experiences are with the numbers of people and so forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has an effect in lots of different areas.
Okay.
Right, for sure.
And, all right. What else you want to talk about?
Well, you know what today is?
No, I don't know what today is.
This is an interesting thing.
Oh, okay. Hang on. We're going to vote on that after you're done. Go.
Right. Every day.
By the way, you can contact when Dean says, now this is interesting. Or for that matter, okay, if I say it, and you choose, you can go on Twitter, you can go on Instagram, you can go on.
Let us know on a scale of 1 to 10.
Facebook. Yeah, is it really
from a
interesting?
frowny face to a happy face?
1 being very interesting, or you want to go the other direction?
No, well, this is a cultural thing.
Oh,
I mean,
jeez, here we go.
I
knew it.
Does
as
number
soon as I
1
said
represent?
it, I could just see it go out of my mouth. And him jump all over it.
Is number 1 like the best, or is number 10 the best?
Yes.
And is it because
are we asking Bo Derek? There's an old reference. Not that she's old.
Not that she's old, and who cares even if she
if you
is?
see the movie, you don't care. You don't care at all. No.
No, because we write, or we do anyway,
Yes.
write
Well, speak for yourself.
from
Go ahead.
left to right.
Uh-huh.
So the assumption is that the 10 is the best because we're writing in that direction.
It's building.
Right? 1 is to the left,
Uh-huh.
10 is to the right.
Ah, I see.
Okay. But in cultures where we write from right to left,
Uh-huh.
then if you start with 1 on the right, then the best is on the left.
Okay. For just
So
a moment there, I thought you had no idea where you were. You had no idea what you were going to say. You were completely lost in that thought. Is that true?
Do I occasionally give that impression?
No, more often than occasionally, actually.
And I thought you knew me better than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So which end of...
I didn't mean to interrupt. It's probably time to take one last break. While listening to this, you may think, hey, I wonder, well, if you have a question like that and want to ask us, there's a couple ways you can do it. One would be through email, which is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. That's oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And then there's also our handle on Twitter, which is oopscultureshow. That's OOPS Culture Show. I know. It's not original, but it works. Okay?
So on which end of the spectrum, on our spectrum, is our frowny face and
well,
our
I
happy
guess
face?
if you're giving it to us that way, and we're talking to probably the people that we're talking to, we probably should go 10 being the smiley face.
See, because it's on the right.
That's because, well, yes, and because you just described it this way. But the one will be our frowny
Let's
face.
put on an Arab head.
Do we have to have? Excuse me, how are we doing that? That doesn't
we
sound like legal in
we
most.
could put the frown. So there was this
got to be a blue law.
Here's the
against
culture. There was a pharmaceutical company that had an ad campaign in the United States, which worked very well. There was 3 billboards, and on the left billboard was a frowny face.
Okay.
The middle billboard is a picture of somebody taking a pill.
Okay.
And the billboard on the right was a happy face. See, the 10 is on the right.
Sounds
right?
like the United States.
And the message, of course, is take our pharmaceutical and you'll
take the pill, happy.
You'll happy face,
yeah.
right?
That's perfectly true. There's nothing.
They
wrong.
ran
Unless you're
the
driving
same
the other direction.
They ran the same campaign in the Middle East, and they lost millions of dollars.
Yes,
because we're reading from right to left. And nobody at the ad agency knew
I'm
that.
Sorry, but oops, your culture showing. Yes,
and you just cost your company and your client $1 gazillion.
That's right. Probably should have taken, maybe a day and had a training session on that.
Yeah,
probably would have a smart idea right there. Sure. That's pretty good. I like that. I just was thinking, what if I'm driving the other direction and I look at the things? Then it could screw.
Oh, if you look at it through the rear view mirror?
Yeah.
Whoa.
That's not good. It's a downer then, right?
You shouldn't be reading through the rearview mirror.
And they appear closer than they are, or larger than they are, or something like that.
That's the side view mirror.
No, that's the side view. I don't read out of my side view mirror.
There's a rear view mirror on a car. There's a side view mirror.
Yes.
Is there a front view mirror?
No, because you're
you're
looking that way. Remind me not to ride with you ever again. Okay.
I was just taking it to the logical place.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. It makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense. When,
Okay.
well, that's like, see, there should be a camera out the front. There's a camera now in a lot of cars in the rear, right? That you can see to help
I've
you
always
park,
thought cameras should be in the rear.
and so on. Well, that's another podcast, I think.
I mean,
That it may, and not even our podcast, that one. Well, I do have no, never mind. It's
so we were talking about where the frowny face.
no,
and
I was
the
talking
happy
about
face.
cameras in the rear,
okay.
and you went to a dark place.
You just
Which never mind. Okay.
I went to a dark place.
Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, I just thought maybe there should be a little camera in the front that kind of looks down so you can see when you pull into a parking space. Doesn't that make sense? Because you can't see in the front there. Does this have anything to do with what we're talking about?
No, but that's an interesting idea, and I don't want to drop it for. I'll go back to what we were talking about in a second.
Yeah, because you asked about the mirror in the front. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. But the little camera there looking down, like you drive in and there might be a thing to bump into that stops you from driving.
But if you're
through.
driving into the parking space, you
Yes.
can see what's there.
Not once you get to a certain point, you can't see where the end of the parking space is
And-
because the front of your car blocks it.
No, you can see it as you approach it.
No. What? No. Oh, okay.
You don't look far enough ahead.
But no, I do.
No, and I'm saying this for your benefit.
Oh, thank God for you.
That wasn't officious or anything.
No,
was it?
no, not at all. When can you get the concept that when you drive in, like that's rhetorical, I think. When you drive in at a certain point, the front of the car blocks what you can see. So when you're
But
trying to get
before you
closer
drove
to it,
in, you could see if there was a problem.
before I drove in, but now I'm actually executing the driving in. And in doing so, I don't need to overlap. If there's nothing there to stop me, like a curb or a part-time curb that sort of they put out there that you can bump into.
I'm going to stop you.
You're stopping
I'm
me.
stopping you right now.
I knew it would come to this.
Okay.
Thank you, by the way. That might be a good thing.
I think it's a wonderful thing to have a camera there, and I think you should
I think I should do
advance
that,
this.
right?
And let's ask our listeners.
And by
if
the
they-
way, that's patent pending right there. Okay,
if they patent pending, wasn't that an old vaudeville group? Patent pending.
Patent pending.
I
Yeah,
thought so.
they were brilliant. They were one of them threw axes at the other one, while that one was juggling flaming torches.
And they prevented anybody else from copying their act.
Completely.
Nobody else could do it.
No one wanted to. So after that, everybody just went, "Hey, patent pending," and everybody knew what they were talking about. That's right. That's exactly where that came from. Don't even look that up, people. That is perfect.
That is the truth.
Yes.
Once again. So let's ask our listeners. Let us know if you think the cameras in the front.
The camera in the front would be a useful thing.
And then we'll know if Tom's idea is valid.
I mean, we're only talking about it looking almost straight down.
It's a camera looking straight down.
Yeah. It's like I have a car where I can change the look of my rear view camera, and it will look at a certain point, it will look straight down at the bumper.
And share with us also if you think there's any benefit to having a front view mirror in your car as well. Because I just think Detroit missed out on this.
Probably.
They put in rear views and side views and bottom views and top views.
Instead, they put the piece of glass and it seemed to work better if it didn't have anything blocking it.
Back to the 1 to 10.
Are we
Frowny face? We're agreed is on 1s.
Is 1.
And Happy Face
This
is
is so
on 10.
complex. I think you need advanced degrees
Okay,
to
good.
understand this.
So now, working backwards.
All we want to know.
Working backwards is, why are we asking? What are we asking?
I have no idea. I'm completely lost.
No, you're voting on a frowny face.
I really
or
have no idea. Well, anyway, tell us whether you want a 1 up to 10, or down to 10.
just
or
tell us
whatever.
whether you want to anything between 1 and 10 for any reason at all.
Or if you've ever had a frowny face, I guess. And by the way, there's a pill for that. So, oh, good.
So
gracious.
I was
That's-
saying
yes.
earlier.
Well, it's about time.
I hope that by the end of this we will remember. See, here we are trying to remember, and the reason
And there's
you
no
couldn't-
word for it. Remember that? Yeah.
and the reason you couldn't remember why we had 1 to 10 frowny to happy face,
Right.
was this because I couldn't remember too, and that was an example
you
of the
infected
phenomenon
me,
that I was talking
just
about.
like the thing on the elevator, the infection. Yes. Well, it's
And let's ask the
or the-
listeners
or the
if they
plane.
know the name for this phenomenon.
right.
It's kind of
we
like it
definitely want
falls
to know
into
that.
the category
Yes.
of deja vu, I think. You know, these strange psychic or psychological
Connections
phenomenon.
that are there that both get in the way, but also could be benefiting
Mm-hmm.
us. Torrin, did we send you on any chases that we didn't get responses from?
Yes, you asked about if Hong Kong is the. I think,
yes.
Dean, you thought it was third highest in population density.
No,
is that right?
actually, I thought that Hong Kong, and still do, despite what you might say, is has the highest population density in the world.
Ah, okay. Well, you said you didn't want to hear from me if that was wrong, so I have nothing to say.
Well, there may be more density in this room then than well, no,
All
I'm
right,
curious.
what did you find
I'm
out? We're just so curious. You can tell me.
From what I'm seeing, it's in fourth place behind Singapore, Monaco, and I'm probably saying this wrong. Macau in China.
Macau is a bird.
Macau is number 1.
Macau
Really?
is number 1.
Really? And
It's
and,
all
and
those
Monaco
casinos.
is second?
Look,
Monaco is second.
this is interesting. Then
Huh.
Las Vegas should be third because all three are gambling centers.
Yeah.
Macau
Yeah.
is an international gambling center, as is, what was the other one you mentioned?
Monaco.
Monaco,
Yes.
of course.
Of
and
course.
so where's Vegas? And Singapore?
And then Singapore.
Good question.
Now, in Singapore, you could never have those elevators that would shoot you chewing gum.
No.
That's going to be, it's illegal.
It, okay. Why is it illegal to have an elevator that shoots? I can't believe I'm asking this. I cannot believe it's come to this.
Because it's illegal to chew gum in Singapore in public.
Oh.
Now, I don't know if they define an elevator as in public or
that
not.
would be an interesting thing to find out.
But if you're-
I don't really think so. But go ahead.
You know, if you're outside walking the sidewalk in Singapore and you chew gum, it's an offense.
Now, do
you
we
will be
know why?
Yes, because inevitably a substantial percentage of those people who do that will drop their gum on the street,
And it creates a problem.
It creates a sanitary and also
Which it does in the United States as well.
yeah, it's a problem.
Yes.
And so they made it illegal.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's illegal to chew gum in your house.
Right.
But the point is now I don't know this for a fact, so we could maybe look this up, but I would suspect that a lot of chewing gum manufacturers don't view Singapore as a major market. And therefore I think it's probably hard to get.
I see.
But if you were to chew it on private property, like in an elevator, maybe that would be allowed. So maybe they can. Maybe we can, after all, dispense chewing gum
In Singapore.
on the 45th floor
In Singapore.
in Singapore.
All right.
Maybe it wouldn't be illegal, but you wouldn't want to do it on the 44th floor
No.
because that's bad luck, because the number 4 in Chinese is bad luck.
Okay.
So the 44th floor they might not even have a 44th floor in Singapore.
Uh-huh.
And if they did, you don't want the gum to go out there.
No.
Because
I
the
don't
majority
want this
of the
gum flying
population,
out anyway,
the majority,
so I'm okay
I
with
should clarify, the majority of the population in Singapore is Singaporean Chinese.
Ah, there you go. Okay. Okay, so Torin, then your final the final answer to that is Macau is first and most dense, and then comes Monaco. Most dense.
Yes.
Most dense, which is not easy to say.
Densest. Yeah.
Densest, yes. And then come.
I need to go to the dentist.
I need an appointment.
Actually.
Yes, to visit the dentist. On both those definitions. When so it's Macau, Monaco, Singapore, and then
Hong Kong.
And then Hong Kong. Mm-hmm.
Right. All right.
Did you happen to get any others after Hong Kong?
Gibraltar is number 5.
Okay, we're talking about density. We're not talking about total population. We're talking about density.
We're talking density, correct?
So you could be theoretically, you could be talking about
Yes.
3 people, but it's about how close they are.
Number
with each
7
other.
is
You're in a
Vatican
closet.
City,
Oh, see,
which has
There you
800
go.
people.
800
So there
people,
you go.
but they're all in one room.
They are. And they're all waiting for the
Exactly.
smoke to come out of the chimney. Right.
They're all in one room. They're all standing very close to the Pope.
Yeah, they're all in St. Peter's Square there, so that's pretty dense when you think about it. If you get
Yeah,
all
but
those
all
people
of those
there.
people are visitors. They're not nationals.
Are they? Have we checked their passports? I don't think
Well,
so.
I think the majority of them are not nationals of the Vatican City State.
That's a possibility.
I think they're mainly visitors.
Okay. Well,
When I've been there, nobody's a Vatican City national.
okay. How many people have been born in Vatican City? I mean, I
In
would think that
St.
number
Peter's
is
Square?
not large. Well, I don't know. Yes, okay, St. Peter's Square, but in Vatican City. I mean, by the nature of the idea of why it's there,
They probably
I would
have,
say it's pretty small number.
they probably have a population problem. I mean, a generation problem, like Japan.
Well,
know,
no,
I
they
mean,
seem to be good at bringing people in from other areas.
Oh, you can come in. You could get a national.
I think
become
they have a
nationalized.
large immigration status in Vatican City. That's the point I'm making here. I don't know that there's a native population other than the one that lived there before it was Vatican City. Thanks for backing me up on that. We're going to get out of here. Torin, thanks for your help with that. And
My pleasure.
Because that really did make a huge difference to everyone listening. I'm sure it did.
Yes, I'm sure it did do that.
Yeah, really. And I look forward to doing this again. Do you?
There's so much to talk about when we talk about culture.
Really is. There
And,
really is.
and just remember, until next time,
Yes.
oops. Your
culture's
showing.
Smell you. Just want to bother you one last time to say we're a brand new podcast here at Oops, Your Culture's Showing, and we could really use your help by subscribing to the podcast. And not to mention that if you hung around this long and you liked what you heard, well, this makes it just easier for you to get the podcast. They'll pop up for you whenever they're released, so you can listen to them on your phone or your computer or however you listen to them. And it's easy to get, too. Just subscribe using iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. It really isn't hard, and we could really use your support. So, from all of us here at Oops, Your Culture's Showing, thanks.